Part 6, Chapter 7, Zeks at Liberty. We have had a chapter in this book on arrest. Do we need one now called release? Of those on whom the thunderbolt of arrest at one time or another fell, I shall speak only of 58s. I doubt whether a fifth, I should like to think that an eighth lived to experience this release. And anyway, release is surely something everybody understands. It has been described so often in world literature, shown in so many films. Unlock my dungeon, out into the sunshine, the crowd goes wild, open-armed relatives. But there is a curse on those released under the joyless sky of the archipelago, and as they move into freedom, the clouds will grow darker. Only in its long-windedness, its leisureliness, its otiose flourishes. What need has the law to hurry now? Does release differ from the lightning stroke of arrest? In all other respects, release is arrest all over again. The same sort of punishing transition from state to state, shattering your breast, the structure of your life and your ideas, and promising nothing in return. Because in this country, whenever someone is released, somewhere an arrest must follow. The space between two arrests. That is what release meant throughout the 40 pre-Khrushchev years. A lifebelt thrown between two islands. Splash your way from camp to camp. The walk from one camp boundary to the next. That's what is meant by release. You will not be given a residence permit in town, even a small one, nor will you ever get a decent job. In the camp, at least you receive your rations, but here you do not. Moreover, your freedom of movement is illusory. Not released, but deprived of exile, would be the best description of these unfortunates. Denied the blessings of an exile decreed by fate, they cannot force themselves to go to the Krasnoyarsk taiga or the Kazakh desert, where there are so many of their own kind, so many X's all around. No, they plunge deep into the tormented world of freedom, where everyone recoils from them, and where they are marked men, candidates for a new spell inside. It's a vicious circle. No job without a residence permit, no residence permit unless you have a job, and without a job you can have no bread card either. Former Zeks did not know the rule that the MVD is required to find them work, and those who did know were afraid to apply in case they were put back inside. You may be free, but your troubles are only beginning. But on the Kolyma there was really not much choice. They hung on to people. The discharged Zek immediately signed a voluntary undertaking to go on working for Dalstroy. Permission to leave for the mainland was even harder to obtain than your discharge. Just as a common illness develops differently in different people, the effects of freedom upon us varied greatly. Its physical effects, to begin with. Some had overstrained themselves in the fight to end their time in the camps alive. They had endured it all like men of steel, consuming for 10 whole years a fraction of what the body requires, working and slaving, breaking stones half naked in the freezing weather, and never catching cold. But once their sentence was served, once the inhuman pressure from outside was lifted, the tension inside them was also slackened. Such people are destroyed by a sudden drop in pressure. The giant Cholpanyov, who had never caught a cold in 7 years as a lumberjack, contracted a variety of illnesses once he was freed. There used to be a saying, the hard times brace you, and the soft times drive you to drink. Sometimes a man's teeth would all fall out in a year. Sometimes he would grow old overnight. Another man's strength would give out as soon as he got home, and he would die burned out. Yet there were others who took heart when they were released. For them, it was time to grow younger and spread their wings. It comes as a sudden revelation. Life, after all, is so easy when you're free. There, on the archipelago, the force of gravity is quite different. Your legs are as heavy as an elephant's, but here they move as limbly as a sparrow's. All the problems which tease and torment men who have always been free we solve with a single click of the tongue. We have our own cheerful standards. Things have been worse. Things used to be worse, so now everything is quite easy. We never get tired of repeating it. Things have been worse. Things have been worse. But the pattern of a man's future may even be more firmly drawn by the emotional crisis which he undergoes at the moment of release. This crisis can take very different forms. Only on the threshold of the guardhouse do you begin to feel that what you are leaving behind you is both your prison and your homeland. This was your spiritual birthplace, and a secret part of your soul will remain here forever, while your feet trudge on into the dumb and unwelcoming expanse of freedom. The camps bring out a man's character, but so does release. This is how Vera Alexeyevna Kornaiva, whom we have met before in our story, took leave of a special camp in 1951. The 5-meter gates closed behind me, and although I could hardly believe it myself, I was weeping as I walked out into freedom. Weeping for what? I felt as though I had torn my heart away from what was dearest and most precious to it, from my comrades in misfortune. The gates closed, and it was all finished. I should never see those people again, never receive any news from them. It was as though I had passed on to the next world. To the next world, release as a form of death. Perhaps we had not been released. Perhaps we had died to begin a completely new life beyond the grave, a somewhat ghostly existence, in which we cautiously felt the objects about us, trying to identify them. It was as though our freedom was stolen, not authentic. Those who felt like this seized their scrap of stolen freedom and ran with it to some lonely place. While in the camp, almost all my closest comrades thought, as I did, that if ever God allowed us to leave the camp alive, we would not live in towns or even in villages, but somewhere in the depths of the forest. We would find work as foresters, rangers, or, failing that, as herdsmen, and stay as far away as we could from people, politics, and all the snares and delusions of the world. V.V. Pospelov. For some time after he discharged, Avenir Borisov shunned other people and took refuge in the countryside. I felt like hugging and kissing every birch tree, every poplar. The rustle of fallen leaves, I was released in autumn, was like music to me, and tears came to my eyes. I didn't give a damn that I only got 500 grams of bread. I could listen to the silence for hours on end, and read books too. Any sort of work seemed easy and simple now that I was free. The day flew by like hours. My thirst for life was unquenchable. If there is any happiness in the world at all, it is certainly that which comes to any Zek in the first year of his life as a free man. It is a long time before people like this want to own anything. They remember that property is easily lost, vanishes into thin air. They have an almost superstitious aversion to new things, go on wearing the same old clothes, sitting on the same old broken chairs. One friend of mine had furniture so rickety that there was nothing you could safely sit or lean on. They made a joke of it. This is the way to live, between camps. His wife had also been inside. But people vary, and many crossed the line to freedom with quite different feelings, especially in the days when the Cheka KGB seemed to be closing its eyes a little. Hurrah, I'm free! One thing I solemnly swear, never to land inside again. Now I'm going all out to make up for what I've missed. For 2 centuries, Europe had been prating about equality, but how very different we all are. How unlike are the furrows life leaves on our souls. We can forget nothing in 11 years, or forget everything the day after. Each year on the anniversary of my arrest, I organize myself a Zeks day. In the morning, I cut off 650 grams of bread, put 2 lumps of sugar in a cup, and pour hot water on them. For lunch, I ask them to make me some broth and a ladleful of thin mush, and how quickly I get back to my old form. By the end of the day, I am already picking up crumbs to put in my mouth and licking the bowl. The old sensations start up vividly. I had also brought out with me and still keep my number patches. Am I the only one? In some homes they will be shown to you like holy relics. Associations of former Zeks gather once a year, varying the place from time to time to drink and reminisce. And strangely enough, says V.P. Gulletson, the pictures of the past conjured up are by no means all dark and harrowing. We have many warm and pleasant memories. Another normal human characteristic, and not the worst. My identification number in camp began with Yuri, V.L. Ginsburg rapturously informs me, and the passport they issued to me was the ZK series. You read it and feel a warm glow. No, honestly, however many letters you receive, those from Zeks stand out unmistakably. Such extraordinary toughness they show, such clarity of purpose combined with such vigor and determination. In our day, if you get a letter completely free from self-pity, genuinely optimistic, it can only be from a former Zek. They are used to the worst the world can do, and nothing can depress them. I am proud to belong to this mighty race. We were not a race, but they made us one. They forged bonds between us, which we, in our timid and uncertain twilight, where every man is afraid of every other, could never have forged for ourselves. The Orthodox and the Stoolies automatically removed themselves from our midst when we were freed. We need no explicit agreement to support each other. We no longer need to test each other. We meet, look into each other's eyes, exchange a couple of words, and what need for further explanation? We are ready to help each other out. Our kind has friends everywhere, and there are millions of us. Freedom has something else in store for the former convicts. Reunion with family and friends. Reunion of fathers with sons, of husbands with wives. And it is not often that good comes of these reunions. In the 10 or 15 years lived apart from us, how could our sons grow in harmony with us? Sometimes they are simply strangers. Sometimes they are enemies. Nor are women who wait faithfully for their husbands often rewarded. They have lived so long apart, long enough for a person to change completely, so that only his name is the same. His experience and hers are too different, and it is no longer possible for them to come together again. This is a subject which others can make into films and novels, but there is no room for it in this book. End of Part 6.